everybody. Afternoon, everybody. We'll make a start. If you could take your seats for those who wish to. My name is John Barry. I think I've taught some of you at least over the years. I'm a professor here in the School of History, Anthropology, Philosophy and Politics. And actually, the story and the journey of how we've got to this event, which is the second event that myself and Raymond McCord have put on, takes me outside my academic comfort zone, I have to say, and this may be shared with you today. And I'm absolutely delighted that we have had this opportunity for a second event for students and staff to hear directly from victims and survivors on an extremely complex and often very emotive issue. And for me, as I say, it is outside my comfort zone. I don't research this area at all. I do happier subjects like the end of the world with climate change and fossil fuel ending and so on. But this is part of what I think the university's public obligation should be, to create a space for you, particularly the younger students amongst you, who are, of course, our next generation, to learn from the past, and to learn from the past and about the past, not just from books or academics like me, but from people who've lived through some of the worst aspects of the Troubles and the conflict here. So you're all very welcome. The format will be, we have 4 speakers. We'll have John speaking first, then Michael, then Catherine, then Raymond. They're going to speak for about half an hour because we don't want this just to be a lecture. We're going to give about an hour then for questions and answers or discussions or points that people would like to make. So I'd like to invite up John, first of all.
Hi, my name's John Taggart. I'm son of Danny Taggart, who was murdered on the 9th of August 1971. My father, early that morning, there would have been an interment sweep. Totally separate from that, the aftermath of that sweep was that people in the area were panicking of what's happening next. There would have been barricades put up, and people were doing their best to making sure their loved ones would have been safe. My father went round to his brother's house, which is adjacent to the Henry Taggart Memorial Hall, which was the army barracks at the time. He went round there during the day. He had asked his brother to come to safety, with been next door to the army barracks, and he'd be more safer within his sister's house. During the day, as we know now, the interment sweeps happened in niceness areas. There wouldn't have been interment of loyalists, paramilitaries, till maybe 3 years later. So there, in Springfield Park, just adjacent where my uncle had, during the day there would have been a loyalist mob. When I say loyalist, it wasn't Protestant mob, it was loyalists who were brought in lorries from other areas. This is in evidence of RUC officers who were on the ground at the time. Anything that I would say today is all evidence-based. I was only 11 years of age at the time, and this is what we have got as documents, which we have collated over the years. My father had returned later on that day. Again, there was danger from both ends of what could happen. He had went to my brother's house around about 8 o'clock, and he said, Jared, speaking to his daughter Alice, who had told him that day that she was expecting his first grandson, and he had spoke to his brother Jared. They had walked till the end of the street where the initial shots were fired, and they split up. And my father, not knowingly, he thought he would have been safe standing outside the army barracks. Without warning, the soldiers came out and started firing indiscriminately into the crowd of men and women who were gathered along the road. While this was happening, just maybe 150 yards from where my father had ran from, Father Hugh Munn, who lived in Springfield Park, 45 Springfield Park, had seen a local man been wounded, and he left from here till about 100 yards from his house with a white hanky. And a lot of people remember the white hanky, which would have been iconic for with Bloody Sunday and what happened on Bloody Sunday. This is 6 months before Bloody Sunday, and Father Mullen went over. He phoned the army before he went. He says he's going to administer last rites to the man who was in the field opposite his house. He had went into the field, seen a guy called Bobby Clark, who was another resident of that street, and he was on his return journey to phone an ambulance when he was shot. He was shot underneath the arm as he held the white hanky in the air, flat on his back, and he was the fatal shot where he was shot again. I know only 7 minutes, so I'm just going to rush through the rest of it. That's really just bringing you up to how these things had started. Local man Frank Wynn went to the aid of Father Mullen and Bobby Clark. He was shot in the back of the head as he lay helping Bobby Clark. My father down at the bottom of the street, opposite the barrack, where he took cover behind gate pillars. There was a bit of a lull in the shooting, and he run for cover across as if he was going to Ballymurphy, which would have been maybe 100 yards or 150 yards from where he was. He was shot in the leg initially, and he was laying out in the open in this wasteland opposite the barrack. Mrs. Connolly, Noel Phillips, who was shot almost the same time as my father in the leg. Noel Phillips was only 19 at the time, and Mrs. Connolly heard him crying out, the young fellow crying, and she went out. Our last words to the group were survivors who had told us that our last words were, "It's okay, son, I'll help you." And she just walked straight out, no matter where it was the shooting or not, just walked straight out to the motherly thing, as I would say, to help Noel Phillips. Shortly after this, here, two soldiers from the parachute regiment came into the field. One of them was the army officer in charge of 85 paratroopers from the two para, came into the field, and instead of helping, they started shooting people on the ground, which, like I say, Noel Phillips was only shot in the leg, and we have evidence that he was executed, and he was executed from a handgun with forensic evidence where the bullet, 9mm bullet, which we found out later would have come from a Browning pistol, was left in the body. By the time this was over, they had brought the dead and the wounded into the barrack, and the survivors in there had said that they were left. The medical gauntlet of paratroopers who brutalised them, the dead and the wounded, as they says. We had found out later my father was shot 14 times as he lay defenceless on the ground. Mrs. Connolly was shot 4 times, and over the next 2 or 3 days, there would have been 11 in civilians who lost their life in Ballymurphy. This where you had 600 paratroopers in the greater Ballymurphy area, and it didn't happen on the moment of madness. This happened and sustained 3 days where 11 people lost their lives on August 9th to 11th, 1971.
Thank you, John. I'd like to invite Michael up.
Hello, my name's Michael Gallagher. I would just like to say before I start that I'm sure many of your thoughts and prayers today will be with the families in Enniskillen who are remembering that bombing that happened 30 years ago. In my own case, what happened was, well, if I could give a bit of background, to give a bit of history, my family is from Donegal, just across the border, just about 3 or 4 miles from Derry. When I was 9, my family moved to Glasgow, and I spent my formative years there. We came back literally at the beginning of the Troubles, 3 weeks before Christmas in 1968. And at a time later, my youngest brother joined the UDR. His name was Hugh. He was at first full-time and then part-time, and then left the regiment. And 6 months after he left the regiment, he was assassinated. He was married with 2 children, 5 and 3. And at that point in our lives, we thought that was the worst thing that could possibly happen. But on the 15th of August 1998, our only son, Aidan, who was 21 at the time, probably around some of your ages, went into town with his friends to buy a pair of jeans, and he died there along with 30 other people. He never returned. I had, I've 1 boy and 2 girls, and that began the beginning of really a journey which has lasted almost 20 years to find out the truth of what happened with that bombing. It's taken many twists and turns. It was a bombing that there was a strong cross-border element to it, in that the bombers came from Dundalk and spent less than 40 minutes in Northern Ireland and returned there. And we have huge issues with both the British and Irish governments. We believe that there was agents, well, we know there was agents involved on both sides of the border. An American agent called David Rupert, who infiltrated the real IRA, and there are many, many questions to be answered. We delivered a report to the British and Irish governments in 2012 in support of a public inquiry, because we believed that's the only way we were going to get justice. And the British government, the then Secretary of State Theresa Villiers, said no, there had been enough inquiries into Omagh. So we decided then to judicially review that decision, and we're locked into that process at the minute, as is John and Eugene. We're all sort of engaging in the legal process. We went down the political route, going to various politicians right across the board. All we got was cups of tea and sympathy. But having started the legal process, we know that there will be a start and there will be an end. We may not get the end that we want, but we are very confident. There's been a lot of issues that we have raised. We have a lot of knowledge, and in the coming months and year, you will find out a lot more about the Omagh bomb. Like many of the incidents, McGurk's Bar, Enniskillen, Loughin Island, they're endless. We have never seen anybody held responsible for those bombings, and I believe that British